This video, we're going to offer some troubleshooting tips, and some of them will be very basic to some folks, and others they might like the simplistic process for troubleshooting. And this is a 1976 280Z that we are kind of going over, make sure everything's up to date. We converted this back in 2018. We haven't seen the car in 4.5 years, and so it's in our shop because we purchased the car from the individual that had it converted originally. And so we are going to resell it, and so we're giving it the once over. So everything seems to be fine except for a couple little things. And one of them is that the marker light on the driver's side, so this is the passenger side, so it's this front marker light isn't working. And so what's the process that we go through to troubleshoot this? Seems very simple, right? And so a lot of people will just put another bulb in and see if that works or not. But this is the troubleshooting method that I'm going to share with you. So first of all, of course, we removed the two little Phillips screws that hold the lens on, and then we removed the bulb, and then we're going to test the bulb. Well, first off, I did a visual inspection, and visually the element looks good, but that's not definitive. So what we're going to do is we're going to test it using a multimeter. We're going to set it on the ohms setting, so we're going to check our continuity. Some have a continuity tester built in, and you'll connect it and it'll beep and that kind of thing. But in this case, we're going to just check it with the meter here. Set up the stand so we can see it on camera. Trying to do this stuff without bumping the tripod and everything. Kind of shows what a klutz I can be. Okay. So then we're just going to go from the case of the bulb to the center terminal here. And you can see there's almost no resistance. So we have continuity. So the bulb is good. So that's going to take us to step 2. And in step 2 we could use our multimeter also, or we can use a little test light. And that's what we're going to use, test light. Because I only have to hold one probe that way. I'll just clip this to ground and touch this to the center of the holder in the vehicle, and if the test light lights up, we know we've got power. So with the lights turned on, I'm going to put the one end here to ground. Just a little ring on the headlight right here, just kind of out of sight. And then I'm going to take the other end and go to the center here, careful not to ground against the frame here. And you can see that that is lighting up. So the bulb is good and we have power. Why isn't it lighting up? And I had removed the bulb and put it back in a couple times, and it still wouldn't work. So that means that we have a bad connection. And so my guess is it's the base here. And so we're going to take a real fine file. You can take sandpaper, whatever. We're just going to clean that up a little bit, and I'm going to take a little piece, like a little screwdriver, and clean that in. That one is what looks the most corroded. But we'll clean the connections and put this back together. Make sure to turn off the power before you go in there and reach in there and try to clean that. So I took a small screwdriver and I cleaned the contact in there. I filed the that, cleaned it up, put the bulb in, and it doesn't work. So that's telling me that we don't have a good ground, because when I go to a good ground over here like I did before and I come, boom, it lights up. But watch what happens when I come over here to this housing here. Try to do this without shorting anything out. Now it's not coming on. So we've got a bad ground. So we're going to pull this out and see what's going on here. And I'm going to turn off the power again before I do that, but this only allows me to pull it out this far, so I need to look and see how we can get better access to that. But yeah, that's the problem. With ground, we've got the positive at that terminal. It's just this piece isn't being properly grounded. And there's 2 wires. So I know that it's not grounding through the connection, and this has got a boot around it. So yeah, this is grounded with a separate wire, and then so the ground and power are both separate wires. Sometimes you'll just have one wire and the ground is back through the body, but that's not the case in here, and that was obvious because this is all rubber mounted. So let me investigate a little bit further here. Well, next I just pulled this metal housing away from this rubber mount to check the ground, and the ground looks good on this end. So then I traced it, and one of the things that's important when you're doing troubleshooting is good lighting. And so using a good flashlight, I look down there to see where it goes, then underneath the car, and tracked it where it comes up. And so let's take a look at where it comes up into the next connector. Well, I've pulled this loose. It was down in there where we can't see it quite as easily, but I disconnected the connector. So the other side down there that we can't really see in the hole right now, without maybe some additional lighting here, you can kind of see it right there. It's kind of pointing that way. Anyway, that is the other portion that connects right here. So this is the part that connects to the car. So we have power, and I could tell by looking at the other connector over here when I told you, it's like the ground is black. So this green with white would be the 12 volts. So I put my trouble light across that, nothing. So we've got a bad ground, but what happens is it goes in here and it's loomed. And so I'm not going to find it easily. I don't know where that goes, where the ground is on that. I might take a look a little bit, but if I can't find the ground and verify that, what I'm going to do, and that happens sometimes when it goes into a loom light. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. You can see we have a ground right here, which is for our something. At this point, almost 5 years later, I don't know, that's going to the cooling pump or fans. Well, anyway, but we have a ground right there. And there's plenty of other spots we use around. So what we can do is we'll just splice in to here and make our own ground. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. But first, you need to identify what the real problem is. So like I said, I'm going to run down and see if I can't find the ground situation. But I don't think that's going to be the path, most fruitful path, because everything else is working except this one light. So it might just be easier to splice right here and come to ground and be done with it. So let me take a look and I'll come back. Okay, so I have what I'm going to need. I've got my little butt connector I'm going to use. I got to get a ring terminal that I'm going to use on this other end there where it connects to the vehicle, but I got some dikes, some strippers, and the crimpers, and I need to get down in this hole right there. And so that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this black wire just before it goes into this loom. I mentioned I was going to check, see where it goes. Well, I visually looked, and then I looked at the schematic, because we have a manual for this car that we purchased way back when. This was the first Z that we had done. And so we purchased a manual for it. And the manual shows that it all goes back over towards the battery, and there's a ground over there somewhere. So I'm not going to bother doing all that. This is a very short run. Use a little short piece of wire to make this happen. So because of the tight quarters here, you know, trying to get a camera, a tripod, all that in here, I guess maybe a GoPro, you know, on a headband kind of thing would work, but I'm not going to bother. I'm going to just cut back and show you the finished product. Yeah, this is the ring connector, butt connector, the wire, and the tools. So that's all that I'm going to need to do this job, and should only take a moment to do that. But doing the proper troubleshooting, you know, takes a few minutes sometimes. I spliced into the wire, and I put the two wires in one side of the butt connector. Okay, that leaves this other side of the butt connector. If I ever need to add another little ground to something, I can. And so these will get tucked back down and connected, but there's where my ground is, right there. One additional wire. And so the moment of truth will be to see if it lights up. And so all I have left to do is put the lens on. So I'll put the lens on, and well, before I even put the lens on, I can turn it on. So we'll turn on the lights and confirm that it works. Check all the others. All the running lights are working, including that one. So that's job one down. Second one we're going to do is the turn signals don't work. And so we need to figure out what's causing that. So there it is, back together and working. So, like I said, on to the turn signals. We repaired the side marker light, and next we're going to troubleshoot the turn signals. We've got flashers, as you can see, but the turn signals are not working. So that's what's next. So the obvious question is, where do you start? Well, I'm not a Datsun Z guy. Really don't know anything about them other than, you know, what we come across in converting the car. But as far as the idiosyncrasies of the Zs themselves, I'm not that familiar. I do know that on this, model, the fuse box is on the kick plate over here, kind of in the dark right now, and the camera's not focusing because it's dark. But it's on the passenger side. We checked all the fuses. They're all good. So that's not an issue. The mechanism feels, a little, I don't know, not real crisp, for lack of a better term. The high beams work, all the other lighting works, the flashers work. We just don't have turn signals. So supposedly we have power since no burned out fuses. Well, the previous owner of the vehicle, we just recently purchased this vehicle, said that the turn signal mechanism itself is a common failure point. Well, like I said, I don't really know. Could probably do some research on the internet. But what I'm going to do is we're going to do some troubleshooting. You can, see things on the internet and say, oh yeah, that's common, but that doesn't mean that's what what it is in this case. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at this point. This is kind of the end point. We know the lights work. So we're going to start here and go backwards. And so head back towards that fuse. So what we're going to do is there's a cover here, and there's like 5 screws that hold this 2 halves of this cover. We'll drop this apart, and that will expose the wiring. And then we'll, see where we have power and see what's going on. It's just a, methodical operation here. So I'm going to remove these panels and be right back. So here we are looking at the back side. So the camera is down towards the brake and clutch pedals, looking at the back side of this steering turn signal mechanism here. And so this right here is the turn signals. This is the high beam. So on the turn signals, you can see we have 3 connectors. And we have what I'm guessing the center would be the power in, and then one would be left and one would be right. I'm not sure which one's which. But inside there's going to be a little copper bar that when you move this lever, it'll go and take power from one. When you move it down this way to take it to this one. You move the other way, it goes between here and there. So it's providing, continuity through that switch right there, which then sends power to your flasher mechanism, and then from there out to your lights. Typical turn signal system. So we're going to see if we have power here. If we don't have power here, we're going to see what's next and go downstream, or upstream in this case. Maybe no, I don't know. We're going to go the other direction. We're going to go from here and follow that wiring path. Okay, with the ignition on, using my little trouble light, got the other side connected to ground. We're going to go right here. Center one, no power. Lower one, no power. Upper one, no power. So, if it had been, that we had power here, but it just wasn't going, we know it was this switch. It's not that switch. So, might be the flashing unit itself. So, let's see what's next down the line. Well, we've got a connector here. We'll check this connector and see if we have power, and get some insights from there. So that's what I'm doing next. We're gonna keep going, upstream until we find, where the power source should be. So I'll show you the schematic maybe later if I remember, but It is really, in the book that I have, it is really small. I can only look at it under magnification, and then they've got so many wires, you know, parallel to one another, trying to trace. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, the power for both the flashers and the turn signals appears to come from this switch, the flasher switch here in the console. So you flip the switch forward and the flashers come on. And we saw them, you know, on the outside of the vehicle at the beginning of this segment. So we've got power there, but the switch is such that when you flip it here, it's supposed to send power to the turn signals. And we're not getting power to the turn signals, but we're definitely getting power here because the flashers work. So I'm thinking we may have ID'd our source here, but we won't know until we remove that switch and take a look at it, do some testing. So that's what's next. So here's the switch. Just pulled it up out of the console. And I had to pull the wires a little bit to get enough length here to kind of be able to, you know, at least access the thing. So hopefully didn't unplug anything else. I'm trying to do that. And what we have here is, you know, a light on the bottom. And so that's what this is. This is the light. So we'll remove the light and get it out of the way. And then we have 4 little tiny Phillips screws that, trying to hold the camera and do this. 4 little screws hold the cover on. So I'm going to remove the light, remove those 4 little screws, and see what we have underneath that cover. See if we can get access to the, you know, to the wires going in, and check and see where we have power and if we have power coming out of this thing for the turn signals as well as the flashers. I'll be right back. Well, that was a little bit of a learning curve in that when those 4 screws, when I took the last one out, this whole thing popped apart. So here's the housing. I'm not going to tilt it because it looks like little parts will come out of it still. But the switch connects right there, and here's the switch. So here's the back side that we saw before. And there's the top side. And so I guess that plastic thing moves this one way. And that's the flashers. It moves it the other way. Should be the turn signals. Just had my light fall on me. So we're going to have to do some tests to see what's going on here, why the turn signals aren't working. So it might just be those contacts need to be cleaned or something. Start here with this switch and see what's going on. But yeah, putting it back together so nothing falls down in there. I mean, there's a lot of things connected here. I don't want to be yanking everything apart. This switch probably plugs in somewhere. Maybe we'll go on the internet and see where I can access that, because I don't want to pull this whole console out. I mean, there's a lot of stuff connected to it there. We've got stereo on these other lights, and then we have some, we got our 2 menu switches and the reverse switch there. And so I really don't want to pull all this out if I don't have to. But let me do a little more investigating, and I'll let you know what I come up with. I loosened up the console. I didn't remove it, but I loosened it up enough that I was able to reach in and pull out the wiring harness and unplug that switch. So let's go to the workbench and take a look at the switch. So here's the switch. I just have the wiring clamped in the vise gently to hold it. And we have the plug, and we have the light that lights up when we turn on the lights. This comes on and lights that little flasher light right there. And then this is the switch itself. So we'll take a closer look at the switch. But what we've done, and we're going to go to the whiteboard in a moment, is we've traced all this wiring from the switch to this connector, so we know what's what, okay? And you'll see why that's kind of important going forward. But let me zoom in on the switch itself. So the switch is such that we have a wire that comes to this kind of fulcrum point right there. So this teeters back and forth. And this side up here is the flasher side. And these two connectors electronically connect to one another. So when this goes this way, power goes from this fulcrum point and goes out both of these terminals, okay? Now on the other side, and this would be with the flashers off, so when it's in the down position here with the flashers off, these two are not connected electrically to this fulcrum point. There's a little insulator between the these contacts and this, mechanism here. But these two are connected electrically. So in other words, power comes in to one terminal, goes across, and comes out the other one. Okay, so what we have here is power would go in to this fulcrum point right here, and then it goes out both of these terminals, and that's the flashers. When it's in this position, the incoming wire is ignition switch. So when the ignition is on, power comes here, goes through to the other side and out that other wire. And my thoughts are as such. Let's go to the whiteboard. So here is what we have. I've got the plug, and I've got the switch, and I got my identifying information. So what you have on the switch is just what I showed you. We've got 12 volts coming into that center fulcrum rocker point, and then you have two connections going out, and they're connected together both mechanically and electrically. And so when that button is pushed to go towards flashers, these connect, and you have 12 volts here and here. When it's in the turn signal position, or should I say when the flasher switch is off and the ignition is on, then 12 volts comes through here. These two are connected mechanically and electrically, and so power comes through the one terminal and goes out the other. And where it goes, I'm not sure. One of the interesting things about this car is that you have a certain set of wire colors on one side of the plug, and on the other side, or connector, and on the other side of your connector, there's totally different wire colors. And they've got tons of connectors, and it's loomed and everything, so trying to trace all this down and where it's going and why it's not working, I don't want to tear the whole dash apart and everything. I just want a quick fix so that the turn signals work and life can move on to something else. So what I did is I looked at the color of the wires. So these are both green wires on this. This is a green and white, green with red, green with black. And here is where they are on that plug. So I labeled them. And we have a red with blue and a black. That's what's used for that little light. And so I checked to see what's going on that plug on the vehicle side. These are the switch side colors, but on the vehicle side of the plug, I did some testing, and we've got 12 volts here, the green with white. It's got 12 volts, and it's got 12 volts with the ignition off and with the ignition on. There's 12 volts right there, okay, which makes sense with what we know here. And then this green one, so we'll say this one right here, that's 12 volts, but only when the ignition is on. And then it's going to go out this green one right here. And again, I don't know where that goes. So also checked for, continuity to ground. So this one's got continuity to ground. Well, that's because, it's going, through the bulb to ground. The black, I'm guessing, is ground. It goes to ground. These, I'm guessing this is, one side of the car for the turn signals and flashers, and this is the other side. So again, you're going to have continuity to ground, you're going to have resistance, but basically you're going to have continuity with some resistance to ground. And even on this one, I had some continuity to ground. Interesting was when I put my test light on this one, the flashers flashed. So all these are good insights, okay? So from all of this, I come up with this, that the green is the turn signal power, and this is going to the turn signals. And so the red with green, that's the driver side flashers or turn signals. Green and black, that's the passenger side. And so when we put the flashers, these two are going at the same time. And then the green with white is the flasher power, okay? So that's kind of what I determined by looking at these parts. Now, where these things go, where the flasher is and all this, I've got a schematic, but the schematic I have in the book is so small, even under magnification, it is hard to read. It's 2 pages, and it's really, really, really fine. And then they've got tons of lines. Hang on a second. And there are tons of lines that are parallel to one another. And oh my gosh, make you nauseous almost. So these are the 2 pages for a 76. Tried to find something better on the internet. Found stuff for 77s, and you look at known things and you look at that, well, they're not the same. And so I couldn't find anything that when you looked at the schematic and I looked at what's physically there, they weren't the same. For instance, we're not using one of the pins here. On some of the others they do, but it doesn't really show you easily where things are going. So like I said, I just didn't want to make this into a multi-day project. So here's the way I envision it. So we've got our flasher switch right here, which we've looked at both drawn out and physically. We've got unswitched 12 volts. Comes in, and when you flip the switch, these two close, and that goes out to my flashers. Cut and dry. I can test it with jumpers and everything, and everything works just as I know it should. Okay, but I verified that without the switch, and I've tested the switch and everything. The switch is fine. I'm going to clean it up and everything before I put it back in the vehicle. But the switch is currently working. Okay. And then on the other side, when we have the switch off, this would be on. When it's off, these close. And so we've got ignition switch 12 volts. When this switch is closed, comes down, goes through here. Like I said, these are mechanically joined and electrically joined, and that puts 12 volts going to here. Now, the way I envision this working is that this 12 volts now comes into here to this, single pole, double throw with the center off setup. So this is our turn signal indicator, okay? Our turn signal switch on the console. On the column. So what happens is you turn it one way and you have, passenger side signal comes on. You do it the other way, the driver's side signal comes on, and in the center, they're off. And you turn off the ignition. There's no power to it, would be off. And then when you turn on the flashers, this is all, voided at that point, doesn't come into play. This comes in and the flashers come into play. So, here's the problem. When you put power here, internal turns, I don't have turn signals. Okay? So it's not that easy. But if I use this green and white wire, when this provides power to this one alone, or these combined, this is coming through the flasher. So then it works, okay? That's going through the flasher, and then when it hits the ground, it flashes, okay? So this is needed in my circuit. So I tested to see if we could go from here to here, because this is what's going out to the turn signals, or so I thought. And but that doesn't work. This seems to be where the problem is, somewhere between here and the turn signals. It doesn't work. So what we're going to have to do instead is we're going to have to take this and go directly to here. And so I tested that with a jumper, and it works. So let's kind of change this to the way that I'm going to do it. So I'm going to do this so that this one then comes over here like that, okay? Or in this case, like that. And then instead of this being ignition switched 12 volts right here, we're going to come down like this. So when the hazard switch is on, we get our power, and both sides of the vehicle, lights front and rear, flash. When the hazard is off, then this is going to come through here and go over to the turn signal stock. And when you flip it the one way, we're going to have right turn. When you do it the other way, we'll have left turn. And so to do this, I'm simply going to run a wire from the vehicle side of the switch there. I'll just cut that existing green wire, splice into the connector here, and then run a wire to here. And so I'll cut the one in the car right there. And I'm going to put this splice in just like I drew in. And that worked. I already tested it using, jumper wire, and it worked. And so I think I'll put an extra inline fuse in here. Just for the heck of it. But that's going to be my fix. So, trying to figure out What the disconnect is from here to my signals, I don't know. And like I said, it's with it in the vehicle and everything, it's just too hard to trace. I'd have to tear apart the dash and everything and try to figure out what's going on. Anyway, I'm going to do that and we'll come back and test it. So using my ohm meter, I wanted to find, this middle terminal on the turn signal switch where it came out. Well, it's this green wire goes into the plug, which comes out to this white one. And I've spliced a brown wire to it and ran it across to the other side where our flasher switch is. And I used my ohm meter to confirm that, there was continuity from here to here. So we're good. So before I splice it in on the other side, I'm just going to connect it with a jumper and make sure that it works. So here's my brown wire coming from the other side I just showed you. I have it jumpered to the green with white. It's not green with white on this side, but it looks like a blue wire. Anyway, the green or the white off of the switch. And I indeed have flashers. That's working. So now I just need to splice this end to that green wire that we don't know where it's going, why it's not working. We'll splice that into there, and then we got to make one more splice. And just as a reminder, that one more splice will be here. We got to go from the green with the white to the other green, and this is the green that's going to go to our turn signal indicator. So, our stock. So I'm going to put a little inline fuse in next, connect to the green, and then make this splice, and we're ready to button it up. But we'll test it before we button it up. Well, here's the flasher switch plugged in. I haven't routed it through the console yet. I'll do that in a moment. I just wanted to test it before I went through all that trouble. So you can see what we've done is we've got a splice, like I said, goes to brown wire that goes over to the turn signal lever. And then we have another splice here where we spliced the green with white to the other green, which allows it to go through the switch when we're in the flasher off position, goes through that, comes out here, goes to the brown wire, and provides the power and everything for the turn signals. And when it's in the flasher position, we have flashers. And let me turn off the flasher. And see if I can reach over and turn on the turn signal. You can see it in the dash. It's the right hand turn signal for the passenger side. And away it goes. And what made all this doable and easy is the fact that the Datsun uses separate lights for brake, turn signals, so forth. But anyway, kind of unorthodox, not a typical repair, and it wasn't plan A, but plan A to repair the existing problem was going to be much more involved, much more time consuming, most likely. I mean, I did some, tracing and searching around. It just was not going to be the path of least resistance by any means. And so this idea is simplistic, Let me turn off the flasher. It was simplistic. It was something that is going to be reliable, and I'm confident that this will outlast a lot of the other things on the car. And so, yeah, like I said, kind of an unorthodox repair, but a repair nonetheless. We now have everything functioning. The only downside of this would be if you were to leave the turn signal on and walk away from the car, you could run down the battery. And so, the 12-volt battery. And so, that's the only downside to this. And so, but it's got a pretty loud flasher, and you got the dash light arrow flashing at you, and of course then the outside light. And if you're that dead to the world, then you end up with a dead battery. So I'm going to put this all back together and test it, a final time to make sure it's working. But yeah, should be downhill from here. Well, thank you for joining me as I did the troubleshooting and the repair of the one clearance light and the turn signals. Didn't turn out exactly like I thought it would, as we did a little unorthodox repair on the turn signals, but they work, and everything is good. And we're going to call this video a wrap. And I hope that you would subscribe and like and all that other stuff that everybody asked you to do on YouTube. We're going to try to do more videos such as this in the near future. Some more, troubleshooting tips, general EV tips, that kind of thing. Just got to think of which things I want to feature. I mean, we've been doing this since 2008. We've done lots and lots of conversions, and so there's lots of little things that we've learned along the way, a lot of little tricks that we use, and so we do have things that we can share with you, and it's just a matter of getting my thoughts together and filming it and making it happen. So anyway, thanks for joining me. Hope to see you next time.